up with the Thomas DVDs, you might remember this guy called Mr. Perkins, or even Mr. Arkwright. These two were on DVDs mainly as filler, and for what they were actually pretty good. It's been years since I have last watched any of these segments, and I have never seen all of them, so that made me wonder, what if I watched every episode of the Engine Drivers, including the YouTube stuff, and review each episode and discover the lore in the story behind these segments? Also, this is kind of the closest thing I've gotten to covering the show in 4 years, and that might be depressing for some, but I see this as progress. So let me take you, my wonderful viewer, into the world of the Engine Drivers DVD segments.
Hello?
The Engine Driver segments actually started in season 12, which I was shocked about. It was started on May 9, 2009, and Mr. Arkwright would make his first ever appearance on the Team Up with Thomas DVD. For those of you who are familiar with the Engine Driver segments, you might only know of Mr. Perkins. Well, that's because Mr. Arkwright only appeared on 2 DVDs. After the Team Up with Thomas DVD, he would make his final in-person appearance on Percy and the Bandstand DVD, which released in July of 2009. Mr. Arkwright only lasted 2 months before being retired. Just freaking justice for Mr. Arkwright, that sucks. The reason for Mr. Arkwright not being in these anymore is due to Short and Curly's, the company making these, no longer producing them, and Scruffy Dog Media would have to take over and do the Mr. Perkins segment. Even though Mr. Arkwright's segments were short-lived, what are they like? Well, Mr. Arkwright's segments are about him making a cardboard engine that Lady Hat designed, and making a sandwich. These segments are carried by Mr. Arkwright's actor. He has such a nice charm, and it adds so much in these. In comparison to Mr. Perkins, Mr. Arkwright doesn't have too much to his episodes. But his episodes are still really fun, but they aren't really anything too special, except for his sandwiches. In the first episode, he makes a sandwich with bread and white cheese. This has to be by far the worst sandwich ever. It's literally just bread with white cheese. And that's not even the worst it gets, because he makes a sandwich in his sandwich episode. And his sandwich is just bread with stinky cheese from Farmer McColl. That's all I can really say about Mr. Arkwright though in his segments. But surprisingly, the lore for him doesn't end here. He actually appears in the Mr. Perkins segments on the phone. That's really the Mr. Arkwright stuff. Now this is where I get to review pretty much every episode. Mr. Perkins, the absolute legend. His first appearance is in the Splish Splash Splosh DVD. It starts off simple. He makes a nice little Thomas cake. It's a nice introduction episode to show you who he is and what he's like, and it ends with him bringing the cake over.
Get back to my magazine.
Episode 4 starts off like usual, where we are somehow in the Engine Driver common room, and Mr. Perkins is talking until he hears a parrot. It's a very generic episode and overall boring. The parrot messes things up, and it ends with the parrot helping Mr. Perkins in the map, so he trusts him to be alone. It was actually cool to see a parrot with Mr. Perkins, but it's still rather boring episode regardless of parrot. Episode 5, Mr. Perkins is apparently friends with Mr. Arkwright. He talks about how he and Mr. Arkwright are just good friends, and he's gonna throw a surprise party for him. Apparently, Mr. Arkwright took James out for a job, and throughout the Mr. Perkins segments, we hear all about his side quests he completes, and every little bit of lore of Mr. Arkwright I will make sure to update you on. This segment is mainly just about him getting stuff ready for the party. We find out he's a good artist with his painting of James he did, so John Pat even takes this party seriously because he calls Mr. Perkins to see how it's going. He then shows us what records are and how they work, which probably was useful for some kids. We also find out that Mr. Arkwright likes happy, fast music. We don't get to know how the party went. Maybe Mr. Arkwright hated it, and that's why it was never brought up again. But hopefully it went well. I mean, Mr. Arkwright deserves this. Episode 6 is all about Mr. Perkins celebrating Christmas. Kind of weird to have a Christmas episode with only episode 6, but it's nice. When the carolers break into the common room, we find out Mr. Perkins is the only person in the UK to not know what the words to the Jingle Bell song is. This is also one of the few scenes where we see real people that are Mr. Perkins and they never acknowledge us. So we could easily be in Mr. Perkins and Arkwright's imaginations. Maybe the reason we don't get to see Mr. Arkwright anymore is because he stopped seeing us. So in other words, he got better. Sadly, Mr. Perkins has not. Mr. Perkins decorates his tree, and he finds some gifts to wrap, but they don't seem like kid stuff. He debates on calling Topham, but doesn't because he trusts Topham's judgment. But then he finds out that the box with the actual kids' toys is not the stuff he wrapped. Apparently, Mr. Arkwright was supposed to pick up the kids, but Mr. Arkwright sadly gets stuck on Gordon's hill because Edward popped a piston. So Mr. Perkins fills in for him, and he has to wear the Sin outfit that 100% suits him. I am just a little bit upset that we got robbed of Mr. Arkwright wearing the Sin outfit, though. These early episodes, for some reason, really wanted the kids to know about Mr. Arkwright and how he's doing, and that he's doing pretty well, which is something I would have never expected them to do, but I do appreciate them talking about him, weirdly enough.
Oh!
Episode 7 is just Mr. Perkins building a model railroad and having a lot of fun. There's something weirdly wholesome just seeing him play with toy trains he was given to set up while talking to you. Also, Mr. Perkins says Fat Controller instead of Sir Topham Hatt. He might have said that before, but it's just really weird, and I didn't expect him to actually call him that. I thought that was some sort of like nickname, not like what you would actually, say to someone.
Clock.
Episode 8 has Mr. Perkins losing his sanity. He walks in and talks to stuff until he notices us and we have to listen to him. Apparently, he's so excited because it's his day off, which makes you wonder, why do you go to work? Oh, apparently Topham had the same question and he just went into his office to get some things. Cool. Topham even asked him to do him a favor on his day off, which, Topham, that sucks. Why would you do that to him? He has to wait for Henry's delivery, and it shouldn't be long, but that look on his face tells me otherwise. We cut back to Mr. Perkins getting food for his picnic, and we see a sandwich! This one only has stinky cheese and tomatoes. He also doesn't like sand in his sandwich, which is apparently a very important thing to know. Eventually, a delivery arrives, and he gets his lemonade. After the lemonade, Mr. Perkins gets a chair delivered. He's still waiting for Henry because he just hasn't shown up. Eventually, he does show up and Henry's delivery shows up with him. But Topham accidentally robbed Mr. Perkins' time, so for some reason, Mr. Perkins has the great idea to dump the sand from Henry's delivery and make himself a beach at his work. This is so depressing. This episode's kind of the start of Mr. Perkins going insane, so I kind of hope the next one is better for his mental health.
I saw a great big chicken.
Episode 9 is not good for Mr. Perkins' mental health. He sees a chicken in a knight in shining armor walking around, and he thinks they are real. Topham tells him he's holding a costume party in Knapford, and he gives him a chest of costumes for him to try. This episode is mainly just Mr. Perkins messing around in costume, but we do get 2 new characters introduced, and they are Mr. Hobson and Mr. Bennett. Hobson is from the coaling plant, and Mr. Bennett, we just don't freaking know, but they both have the same outfit Mr. Perkins had, so he has to choose a new one. Mr. Perkins also tries to be funny and fails. Guys, Mr. Arkwright lore! He's going to the party as a clown. That, would have been cool to see that, but whatever. The episode ends with him going as Topham, which is actually really fun.
Oh dear.
Episode 10 has Mr. Perkins get ready for a talent show. He plays the piano, and the station master next door calls and just says, "Hey, shut up, dude, you're too loud." He tries tap dancing, but it doesn't work. He tries juggling, but it doesn't work. We also find out he has canonically met Mr. Bubbles, which I find to be really funny. The episode ends with him telling Topham he isn't good at anything, which Topham replies, "Well, you're good at your job." And the episode ends. I'm sorry, but Mr. Perkins surely had some hidden talent. He did a pretty good painting. Could he have not done that? Episode 11 is all about Mr. Perkins and other engine drivers. We got the legend, Mr. Arkwright, who's apparently a musician, and Mr. Roberts is too. The engine driver trio is going to be playing together. Hey, wait a minute, why didn't Mr. Perkins play something for the previous episode? He wasn't good at piano, but Why not play the instrument you're actually good at? Mr. Arkwright calls Mr. Perkins and he tells him that he and Mr. Roberts are running late and to set up the instruments. So he does, and we find out he plays the drums. Mr. Arkwright calls and he says he and Roberts have work because of more confusion and delay. He tells Topham that they're busy working and he says, I don't care, do it anyway. So naturally, Perkins becomes a one-man band. Mr. Perkins might be the most overworked engine driver by Topham.
There's no coal.
You won't believe this, everyone. We're halfway through the original series. Anyway, episode 12, isn't that interesting? Mr. Perkins runs out of coal, and he gets cold. He calls Mr. Hobson, a character I didn't think would return again, and the episode ends with Thomas giving Mr. Perkins coal and saving his life, which is a rather standard episode by engine driver standards.
Ugh.
Episode 13, this episode, Mr. Perkins is excited about this magician coming over to perform at the engine driver's common room. Even Mr. Arkwright is hyped for this. The station master calls Perkins and is like, can I bring Mr. Bennett from the logging station over to see this act? It's gonna go crazy. It's nice to know where Mr. Bennett works. Mr. Perkins is in charge of setting things up before the magician comes over, and they said it shouldn't be too hard trusting him. But he only has 3 chairs to set it up, so, maybe they shouldn't have let Perkins set this thing up. He has a normal chair, a tiny stool, and his beach chair from episode 8. That is not enough chairs. So many people are going to be standing. Topham calls and he says he's coming over, and then he calls back and tells Perkins the magician is stuck on the mainland and tells Perkins he has to do it and learn some magic tricks. I used to think that Topham loved Perkins and trusted him, but now I'm more concerned that he knows he can make him do anything he wants and he will deliver. Everyone arrives except for Mr. Arkwright, unless he's filming the thing or just out of frame, and we see Mr. Perkins absolutely put on the worst magic show of all time. And wait, is that Topham a hat? Live action Topham is real!
What's happened here?
Episode 14, Mr. Perkins just cleans. Yeah, they really ran out of ideas for this one. Episode 15 has Mr. Perkins with some carrots. Apparently he wants his carrots to be the biggest so he can win a competition. Even Mr. Arkwright is competing and he has some lettuce. Perkins tries to get the carrots to grow in multiple ways, my favorite being singing the Thomas theme with them and just saying the word grow. He has a big carrot and wins a trophy, and he gets really emotional. This episode is also the one where he bakes a Thomas carrot cake. Mr. Perkins made this, and that just makes me wonder, why didn't he bake something for the freaking talent show? This episode wasn't particularly good for Perkins' mental health, and I feel he went a little bit insane trying to get his carrots to grow. Overall, it's a really boring episode, and I'm starting to feel the charm kind of wear off while watching so many of these at once. Episode 16 has Mr. Perkins wanting to make the common room be more colorful. He debates about painting the walls, and now I wonder if he's the only one to go in the common room regularly. It's probably just his office at this point. I like to think that the other drivers warn each other about the Perkins office because nobody really wants to talk to Perkins because he's kind of a weird but nice guy. He decides to paint a painting, and he says he's a good painter so he won't spill a drop of paint, so immediately he spills a drop of paint on the painting. 3 times. This episode might be the only engine driver episode to follow the 3 strikes formula in it. Well, kinda. Perkins messed up his paintings 3 times, but decided he can make it look good. He made a picture of James that makes the common room genuinely look really nice. Hopefully it stays for the other episodes. The painting is gone. Thanks, episode 17. This is the only episode that has Mr. Perkins leave. Just kidding, of course he can't do that. Topham has a new job for him, and it's really early. So Perkins decided to sleep in the common room. The station master really helped him out and got Perkins a bed and PJs. Here is a picture of the station master. And I just want you to know that whenever you see him, he is a genuinely chill guy. And also, his office is right next to where Mr. Perkins is pretty much 24/7. Perkins struggles to sleep because he is too excited about sleeping at work. He must have no life. He reads some books, but he gets too invested. But he then falls asleep at the end. These feel like they're going on for way too long. Luckily, there are only 5 more episodes, but these segments are Funny enough, better than the episodes they were packaged with, which at this point is kind of getting sad. Episode 18 has Mr. Perkins go get his normal clothes, but what? That's not Perkins' normal clothes! Apparently Perkins is gonna be a pirate for some kids, and Topham calls and says, "Hey, make sure the gold coins are in the chest." And Perkins tells him that they aren't because they aren't. And then Topham reveals that he hid the gold coins around the common room, so that way Mr. Perkins would be good to help the kids with their treasure hunt. I like to think that Topham just had a fun day hiding all the coins and wanted to have a fun game with Perkins, which makes me reconsider him being the main villain of the series if he does a nice gesture. But that doesn't happen terribly often, but maybe he'll redeem himself. Perkins does eventually find all the gold coins, and we get to see him in his pirate outfit. Episode 19, Perkins has to organize a jumble sale. Mr. Arkwright even donates some of his stuff to it. He's really completing all those side quests. Topham calls Perkins and asks him if he can find a book for him. He says he can't because it's too messy, and Topham tells him to clean it up. Once he does, he says the book is a present for Perkins. Again, it's moments like this where I think Topham's gonna be a jerk, but he's actually a really good person to Mr. Perkins. Anyway, the episode's okay and it's not really that great. Episode 20 has to be my favorite episode in a while. So you take Mr. Perkins, a person who is fun and a functional adult, but he's kinda stupid and weird, and you pair him with a new engine driver who is a man who acts like a 5-year-old. Meet Archie. He is the reason why we know Perkins' name is Gilbert, and he has become my favorite character in the series. Throughout the episode, Archie messes things up. Archie doesn't know what a radio is, so naturally he kinda breaks it. Archie doesn't know how to read or hold a map, making Perkins lose all faith in helping him prepare to be an engine driver. It also made me lose all faith in liking this character. But on rewatches, I did love Archie. And this whole time, Archie is just having the best day of his life. He lives to mess with people. And while he has the mind of a literal child, he might be by far the smartest character in the series, which is not saying much, but he is the smartest character in the series. He flat out knows random facts about engines and knows what he's doing. Sadly though, Archie isn't mentally sane enough to not see us. Just like Perkins and Arkwright, he has gone insane and sees us and we get to talk to him. This episode was so much fun in comparison to the boring episodes we have gotten recently, and I wish Archie came back. He was so much fun and overall an idiot, and the scene of them chasing each other in a circle might have been the point I kinda started to lose faith in the episode being good, but luckily it turned it back around.
Oh!
Episode 21 has Mr. Perkins going to a soccer match where the steam engine and diesel engine drivers have a game against each other. Mr. Arkwright is apparently the referee for the game. Glad he's 100%ing the game. Sadly, he can't make it this year. So Perkins has to do it. He gets ready for the game, and he comes back from the game, and what happened to him? Did they freaking run him over? He was just the referee. They shouldn't have beat him up like that. Maybe they got mad that Mr. Arkwright wasn't there that year. I think Mr. Arkwright might actually hold the whole game together, judging what happened to Perkins here. The episode's actually really fun, and it feels like for these final episodes, they really wanted to make them good again and not progressively worse by the end. Also, the steam engine drivers one, that shouldn't have been shocking. It would have been funny if Perkins came back and he was like, yeah guys, the diesel engine drivers won, and they beat me up. Oh! Episode 22. The finale of the engine driver segments before Mattel took it over, and it's Mr. Perkins clowns around. Apparently, Perkins is trusted enough to take care of Topham's grandkids because he took them over and he can't stop laughing at this thing Thomas did with his whistle. So Perkins has to make sure he's funny enough for Topham's grandchildren for his final job of the day. And final job of the series, he just didn't know it. Perkins gets upset because he can't be funny enough for Topham's grandchildren. He tries everything he can think of, even that clown outfit he has. The episode ends with Perkins putting on his hat full of glitter, standing in a bucket, and accidentally having a tomato on his nose. And it's so funny to him, he can't stop laughing. And that's the finale of the series. So you know like those like final line videos? Well, for Mr. Perkins, it's literally just him laughing with a clown outfit, and I find that really funny. Clearly, that was not meant to be a finale for the series, but I am glad it ended when it did. This really couldn't have gone on for more than it did and still be remembered as charming. This overall was a fun series that was more entertaining than the episodes on the DVDs. Hit Entertainment was smart to keep these things going for as long as they did. And when Mattel bought Hit Entertainment, they didn't just end these, they kept them going, but in a different way. We get introduced to Mr. Edward's Signal Box. This is the third and final location of the series. The series was meant for YouTube and I think some Mattel Thomas DVDs. Perkins even got to be a part of Thomas's YouTube tour, which that sounds like not even a big thing, but it was pretty big for advertising. Unlike the driver segments having their own lore and story, Mattel did a nice change and had Perkins read some stories from the Railway series. They changed and modified some of the original illustrations to match more with the TV series, like making Sir Handel blue and not red. I find this a fine and neat way to experience these stories again, and seeing a Railway series Orange Rusty was actually something I didn't know I needed. We even get some Railway series exclusive stories like Gordon Goes Foreign. When it comes to the lore, we actually don't get too much, sadly, but we do get more sandwiches, which is nice. And it turns out that Mr. Perkins is married? We got Mrs. Perkins now! That's kind of it though with the lore. The Mattel era for Mr. Perkins was a nice change, and felt like a definite needed update. That's sadly where the engine driver lore stopped though with the passing of Ben Forster. The series came to an end to not be continued, and I appreciate them not continuing it with a different actor. But there is still one thing I've yet to talk about with this series, and it is the weird sandwich lore. Alright, we need to talk about this. Why is it that the engine drivers make the worst sandwiches ever? Mr. Arkwright has two sandwiches, and they are both just grilled cheese but not grilled. It's white cheese and stinky orange cheese. Could you not just put one other thing in his sandwich? For Perkins, he has 3 sandwiches, but one is unknown. He has his first sandwich, which is a tomato and stinky cheese sandwich, which is an overall improvement when it comes to Mr. Arkwright and his bland sandwiches. But then in the Mattel stuff, Perkins makes himself a cheese and pickle sandwich. But instead of cutting up the pickles, he just puts a whole pickle in there. Is he too lazy to chop the pickles? Then we get the mystery sandwich, which was made by Mrs. Perkins, that we don't even get a good look at. I see something green. Maybe it's another pickle sandwich, but I really don't know. I wish we knew. This bothers me, and I really wish that someone would come out and be like, hey everyone, for this Mattel segment, Mr. Perkins had an insert whatever sandwich named sandwich. So we got all these sandwiches, but how do we know which one is the best sandwich? Well, I decided to make all these sandwiches, except for the tomato one because I didn't know about it at the time, and rank them. In last place has to be the cheese and pickle sandwich. I personally don't like pickles, so I'm super biased here. Next is Arkwright's stinky cheese sandwich because it's so freaking bland. And the best one has to be Mr. Arkwright's white cheese sandwich. Now, is this better than the cheese and pickle one? Absolutely not in terms of creativity, but I just preferred the white cheese better. I did end up grilling these, and they were so much better than just having these as normal sandwiches. And that will be it for the sandwich lore, and that will be the end of this video. Thank you all so much for watching this video. It was so much fun to make and look back at the engine driver segments. I genuinely think that these are kinda underrated, and these, like, if you ever want to watch them, they are pretty fun to watch and have some funny moments. I just don't recommend watching them all in one day. I didn't even do that. Well, that'll be it for me. Goodbye, everyone.